Hey everyone,
Hey guys.
welcome to another Travel Therapy Mentor video. Tonight we're doing a job market update. We actually planned to do this video a month ago, and the day we were going to do it, Whitney went into labor. So a little bit delayed. It's been a while since we made a video, but we've been spending a lot of time with our new baby, and it's been great. It's been fun, difficult, but yeah, she's almost four weeks old now, which is pretty awesome. So we're going to talk about the job market and answer any questions you guys have about the current market. We got updates from all the companies that we work with. So Whitney's going to introduce us, and then we will jump right into it.
All right. Hey, for those that may not know us, we are Whitney and Jared Kazaza. We're both traveling physical therapists. We've been travel PTs since 2015, so going on 10 years now. As Jared mentioned, we did just recently have a baby. She's almost 4 weeks old, so it's been about 6 weeks since we did our last video. We usually try to do them every couple weeks or so, but it kind of varies just depending on our life circumstances. Usually those life circumstances are traveling. Usually our travels are what will impede us from making a video, but yeah, we on Sunday night we were like, oh, we haven't made a video in a while. We should do our job market update tomorrow on Monday. And on Sunday night, I went into labor.
Yeah, that was October 28th. We were going to do it on the 29th, and then she went into labor.
Well, it was the 27th, because my labor lasted 32 hours. So I went into labor on Sunday night and didn't have her until Tuesday morning. So, yeah, if you guys have been following us on social media, you know that we had our baby, and she's healthy, and we're super happy. So I'm not pregnant anymore. That's new. It's been an interesting month getting to learn how to be parents. So yeah, we were able to squeeze in a little time for a video tonight. My mom is watching the baby so that we could make this video for you guys. So we did gather some information from all the different companies that we work with. This information will be helpful whether you're a current travel therapist or you're someone who's thinking about getting into travel therapy. So hopefully you guys will appreciate the information we have today. We'll also talk a little bit about kind of what it looks like planning for your contracts toward the end of the year and the beginning of the new year. We only have 5 weeks left in 2024. That's hard to believe. So if you are watching live either on Facebook or Instagram, we'd love if you'd say hi in the comments. I see Allie is on, as well as Ashley, Jasmine, Kara, Sarah, and a bunch of others. Maddie, hey, thanks for joining. Again, just leave us a comment and let us know if you have questions. Let us know if you're a current traveler or if you're someone who's thinking about starting travel therapy in 2025. Hey, Joey. He says, congrats, guys. Thanks, Joey. We appreciate that.
Thank you. Hopefully you guys can't tell. We don't mess up too much being sleep deprived, and it's been 6 weeks since we made a video, so I feel like very out of practice.
Yeah, and we are actually in our basement doing a video. We've never done a video down here before, but yeah, we realized it's actually a decent spot to do it. So, all right, so we'll dive into tonight. So we work with a bunch of different travel staffing companies. And by work with, I mean we just stay in communication with, we have relationships with. So we gathered information across several different companies, from recruiters, managers, company owners. The companies are all different. So some of them are small, some of them are big. And so we get a variety of answers to give you some perspective on the job market in general.
Yeah.
So we've done these job market updates since 2019, and we do them every few months. So we try to compare kind of what happened from the last one that we did, which was in July. So one of the first questions that we ask them are, what are the current numbers of jobs that you have available for each discipline?
The current numbers for PT, so we always give this disclaimer, but there's a wide range. When we say these numbers, there's going to be a wide range. And the reason for that is some companies, especially smaller companies, often have fewer jobs available than some of the bigger companies. And that's why we recommend working, especially depending on your situation, working with a variety of different companies, small, medium, large, because if you're looking for something very specific, you don't want to work with a small company that has a few jobs in that area you're looking for. So the range is big. Most of the lower numbers are smaller companies, and most of the bigger numbers are bigger companies. So currently for PT, there's anywhere between 300 to 1,200 open jobs, depending on the company you're working with. OT 150 to 500, SLP 150 to 500, PTA 100 to 285, and for CODAs 50 to 100. And how does that compare to July? So it's been 4 months now. Pretty similar overall. There are a little bit fewer PT jobs, slightly fewer OT jobs, more SLP jobs, about the same PTA, and about the same for CODA. So not huge changes in the numbers. Overall, things are still pretty good, but just slight differences in the last 4 months.
Yeah, and so how does this compare to all time? Again, we've been involved in this industry for about a decade, and so we've seen a lot of changes over the years. and what the travel therapy job market looks like. And the reason why we bring you guys this information is we get questions from people who are like, is now a good time to get started in travel therapy? Because maybe they're a new grad and they're not sure about it, or they're thinking about leaving a permanent position to take the leap into travel therapy. So, or maybe they're a current traveler who's like, I have an opportunity to take a perm job, or I could continue traveling. So hopefully a lot of this information that we'll bring you tonight will help you with your decision making on whether you think that it is a good job market for your discipline. In general, it is a very good job market, especially for physical therapists. As you can see, some companies have over 1,000 PT jobs, and that'll be a trend as we talk through some of these other questions.
And those are jobs open throughout the country.
Yeah, so it's a really good job market for PTs. It's actually one of the better job markets for PTAs as well. It's definitely one of the best times that we've seen for PTAs.
For some companies, this is like all-time high numbers, like in the last decade for PTAs. So there was a period there, 2020, 2021, where we were telling those PTAs, like, probably don't leave a good job to travel because there's not that many jobs open. That's not really the case anymore. There's a decent number of PTA jobs. So PT market definitely strong. PTA market probably close to or at all-time highs right now.
Yeah. The SLP market is pretty steady. A lot of those openings are in schools. So if you're looking at other settings, it can be harder to get SLP jobs in other settings. It's definitely going to be school heavy. If you like pediatrics, but there still are a decent number of medical SLP jobs. So it's definitely very steady for SLPs. It has been on the lower end for OTs and CODAs in the last several months. This year hasn't been great for OTs and CODAs, but it's still fairly strong. It's not bad.
And really, it's been on the lower end for 4 years now, in terms of like compared to 2019 levels.
Yeah, so as an occupational therapist, there's definitely a decent number of jobs out there, upwards of 500 for some companies. So there are jobs to choose from. You just may not, you may have to be, just a little bit less selective in certain cases if you're trying to be very particular about a certain city or a certain setting. CODA is the one that the job market is really not very strong, unfortunately, and it has been consistently that way for a while now. So if you want to be a traveler as a CODA right now, you have to be extremely flexible because, as you can see, there's less than 100 travel job openings nationwide. Some of the companies, it was only like 50 or so job openings.
And what makes things even harder for CODAs, and there's several CODAs that reach out to us that we say, it's probably not a good idea to even try to travel. You're not going to be able to find consistent work with like what you're looking for in terms of setting, location, whatever. What makes things harder for CODAs than say PTs or PTAs, you have a small number of jobs, kind of like PTAs do, but PTAs have the benefit of the compact for most states. Whereas CODAs, in order to travel as a CODA, you need a lot of state licenses, which is going to put you in a position where you're spending a lot of time and money getting licenses to be able to have the option to take a job in these various states. Whereas for a PTA, if you're part of the compact, you might only have 280 jobs open with your company, but if you have, if your home state's part of the compact, you have like 30 different states that you could look for jobs in without having to go way out of your way to apply for a license there.
Yeah, in general, if you're going to be a traveler as a CODA, your best bet is going to be to have a California license and try to take jobs in California. And most of your openings are going to be in skilled nursing, with some in schools. And if you do work with pediatrics as a CODA and you can find a school contract, that's a great opportunity because you can lock that in for a full 9 months without having to worry about jumping from job to job, because unfortunately there's not always that consistency where you finish one contract, it might be hard to line up the next contract as a CODA. It is possible. We do know that successful travel CODAs, but definitely the hardest of the disciplines.
For sure.
All right, so next we'll talk about some other questions that we asked the different companies.
So we just want to know, how's the job market been in general for 2024? Now that we're coming to the end of the year, how do the companies, how do the managers, the owners, the recruiters, how do they feel like the market has been overall? And pretty much the answer we got was that it's been a very strong year. Most of the companies that we work with are exceeding their all-time highs in terms of placements, travelers on assignment, those type of metrics that are very important to them. So they see this as a really, really good job market. They've seen a lot of growth this year. And obviously, as you can see with the job numbers for PTs having 1,200 open jobs, there's plenty of jobs, especially for PTs, PTAs, OTs, SLPs, just a little bit harder for CODAs.
Yep. So some of them are saying all-time highs for job orders, especially outpatient physical therapy is really strong. It's been really strong this year. A lot of the companies are saying that the market is steady and continuing to grow, and they see good signs for the year to come. So that was our next So our next question was, how does this job market compare to pre-2020? For those of you that have been in the job market for a while, like us, we kind of look at the travel therapy industry as a pre-2020 and a post-2020 because it's been very different in those different times. For a while, we were just always comparing to the pre-2020, like, is it getting better? In 2020, the jobs dropped off. Obviously the world slowed down. Things were really bad. Then in 2021 and 2022, the jobs came back. People were needing healthcare again, and there was this huge boom. We saw a big boom in rates. And then basically through 23 and 24, we've seen it kind of like steady back out to normal. There were like crisis rates for a while where people were jumping into the market, I think especially early 2022. So anyway, we always ask that question, how is it looking now compared to 2019?
For us especially, this is really interesting because 2020 was basically the midway point of our travel therapy careers now. We got involved in 2015, we're almost in 2025. So it's basically like the first half of our travel and then the second half of our travel. So it's very interesting too to compare what it was like before. Pretty much every company says that compared to pre-2020, the market's basically back to normal or even better than it was back then, which is what we want to see because it took quite a while for some of these disciplines to rebound. And kind of like we mentioned, some disciplines, CODA specifically, but even OT to a degree, has never rebounded completely to where it was. But if you take all disciplines combined, look at job numbers, look at pay, all that compared to pre-2020, then it's either at or better than it was back then.
Yeah, some of them are saying stronger than ever. Some of them say it's the best time ever to be a travel therapist. I would say that's definitely true for physical therapists, without a doubt. It's definitely the best time to be a travel PT that we've seen in our 10 years in the industry. There's more jobs, as Jared mentioned, actually more facilities willing to use travelers, whereas pre-2020, there were some facilities that even if they were short-staffed, they weren't really willing to bring on travelers. Now it seems to be more common. As we know, travel nursing boomed during the COVID times, and so I think that made people more aware of traveling healthcare providers, and so now more facilities are willing to bring on travelers where they weren't before, so that's a good news for those of us that want to be traveling therapists. Pay on average is higher, although we're not seeing those same crisis rates. So like if you came into it in late 21, early 22, you might be thinking pay is decreasing because you were used to those really crazy rates. But like we said, they're kind of just normalizing now.
And still, if you look at the average, they're still right at where they were at the highest point in 21, 22. It's just that you don't see these really high top-end jobs that you used to sometimes. So the average has moved up, I would say, but the top end has come down. So, and I think a lot of times that's what people are paying attention to. They're paying attention to the top like 10% of jobs in the market. So if you only look at the top 10% of jobs, then it might look like it's a little bit less pay overall. But in reality, the average is at or above what it used to be and at all-time highs.
Yep. All right, so next we asked them about specific settings you might be wondering about, because again, the job market varies depending on both your discipline and what setting you're looking for. So we asked, what are the settings that have the most jobs for each discipline? So for physical therapists, outpatient has definitely boomed, and that's unusual because back when we started traveling, we're outpatient physical therapists primarily. When we started traveling in 2015 through 2019, it was hard to come by outpatient physical therapy jobs. Those jobs were pretty stable. They had enough permanent staff. They didn't need travelers. But now, after 2020, a lot changed. People got laid off. People left those jobs, and then when the caseloads came back, there wasn't staff to fill those jobs. That combined with the fact that there's a lot of baby boomers that are coming to the age where they need a lot of care. There's just a lot of reasons now why there's more need for outpatient physical therapists. Burnout, too. We know a lot of outpatient physical therapists that have left that field because they're feeling very burnt out. So there's just a ton of outpatient jobs, which is unusual. It's new in this last year. So outpatient is by far the highest demand for physical therapists, and then second would be skilled nursing.
For OT, it's skilled nursing in hospitals, and for SLPs, it's skilled nursing in schools. Yeah. Those are the highest or most often seen settings for travel jobs.
Yeah, so we get questions a lot like, well, can I take jobs in, outpatient pediatrics or neuro or, these specialty settings? You're not going to see those settings as often. They do come around sometimes. By far, a lot of travel jobs are skilled nursing for all disciplines. There's a lot of outpatient right now for PT. For PT, you're also going to see a good amount of home health and hospital. There's just a good variety of all settings right now. For OT, you're not going to see as many of the other settings like outpatient. We don't see quite as often for OT, but we definitely see a lot of SNF and hospital, sometimes home health. SLP is by far schools. They're begging for school SLPs right now. So if you work in pediatrics as an SLP, you have your pick of all the school jobs that you would like. They'll take you for the full school year. They'll take you for a semester. They'll take you as long as you're willing to go.
Yeah, SLPs, skilled nursing in schools, are vast majority of all the jobs available.
Yeah, and so you might see, again, some of the specialty settings, like you might see some outpatient pediatrics,
Acute care.
for SLP, acute care, that sort of thing, but definitely SNFs and schools are the highest demand.
All right, next question we asked them was, are you seeing any change in rates, increasing, decreasing, or about the same? This was kind of all over the board. I would say the majority of them said that rates are staying about the same as they were throughout the year, as they've been probably for about the last year or 2 years. But there was a few companies that said that there's an increase in rates, and there was like 1 or 2 that said a decrease in rates. So it's kind of all over the board. I would say the average was that it's about the same, but maybe just a slight uptick coming into the end of the year. And that kind of makes a little bit of sense because this is a slower season of travel therapy in general. Fewer travelers want to travel going into the holidays, and fewer facilities want to hire a traveler going into the holidays because they know there's going to be all kinds of disruptions with patient care and stuff like that.
Yeah, so most of them said rates are kind of steady. Some of them said in certain cases, especially like for physical therapists, you have an opportunity to negotiate higher rates. That's just a supply and demand thing, right? So in certain cases, you can get higher rates because they really need you there. However, there's other cases, for example, some of the recruiters mentioned that some of the large outpatient clients, so like your Benchmark, your Upstream, ATI, some of these big outpatient clients have moved to where they're using MSPs or VMS systems. If you're not familiar with those, that's basically where they have like a database where they will list all their jobs, and then they give access, if it's an MSP, they give access to whoever controls that MSP. So like, for example, AMN is a company that controls a lot of the MSPs, and they'll get first dibs on it. And then if any of the other companies want to take that job or get that job, they have to pay a fee to the owner of the MSP. The vendor management system is like a database where they can list all the jobs. Instead of just working with one individual travel company, it gives them access to, a lot of different travel companies. So that way a lot of different companies can submit a lot of different candidates. Makes it easier for them.
In return, they take a fee of it. It's basically an aggregator of jobs.
Yep. So because now there's more need for outpatient therapists all across the country, a big company like Upstream or ATI or whatever is like, oh, we need travelers at all our facilities in all 50 states. So we need to streamline this process, right? Like we need to get a database together here. And because of that, they're trying to standardize their rates across the board. So where it used to be maybe if you were working just directly with one ATI facility to negotiate your contract in this one city, you might have more control over negotiating the rate. Just you and the manager are kind of working it out, and they're like, yeah, okay, we will pay you a little higher because we need to get you here. But now they're kind of, as Jared said, kind of trying to get an aggregate together to where they can control the rate a little better, because they're like, we're bleeding money paying all these travel therapists at all of our different locations across all 50 states. So that is resulting in some of the pay being a little bit lower.
And if you guys don't know, these outpatient companies are really struggling. If you want an example of it, go look at the ATI stock price. It is, it's a disaster. I mean, it's priced for bankruptcy right now. So I would not be surprised at all if ATI files for bankruptcy not too long. And probably a lot of the other big companies are not that far behind. I mean, reimbursement rates are down. All their costs are up. PTs obviously want to be paid more. So all these costs for them are higher, and their reimbursement rates are down. They're trying to force more patients in, more units, and there's only so much of that you can do. So they're all really struggling, and they're trying to come up with some way to cut costs. And one way they're doing that is to just offer a low baseline bill rate, which means that they're not going to pay that much for travelers. And so part of that is going to push down pay rates, but of course you don't have to take those low-paying jobs if you don't want to take them.
Yeah, so it's a big thing. Like, this is an overarching problem in physical therapy that we don't really have the answer to. We could get into this more, but we hear about it all the time from fellow physical therapists, is like, our pay is lower. A lot of people are like, our pay is the same as it's been 10, 20 years ago. You talk to therapists that were in the 90s and the early 2000s, and the pay is like the same, right? Reimbursement rates are the same, if not lower, for outpatient physical therapy. So I think it's an overarching problem. And again, that's another reason why some people are leaving outpatient in general. I don't know what the answer is. I don't know if, maybe more lobbying, maybe we can work through the APTA more to lobby for higher reimbursement rates from these insurance companies, but you have insurance companies, Medicare and all that, constantly trying to cut rates every year. So it's like, where does the money come from, right, to pay the staff? So it's tricky. It's tricky business, but there's a lot of outpatient jobs open for travelers, but not a lot of them are great, to be honest. Like, a lot of these, you're going to be excited. You're going to be like, yeah, okay, I have my pick of 100 outpatient jobs I could go to, but then you interview for them and they're mills and they're not wonderful jobs, and the pay is kind of low, especially if you go through one of these that's through a VMS and they're trying to cut you down on the rate. So you're going to pass that job over, and I don't know what the facilities are going to do. As Jared said, I mean, are they just going to go out of business?
They're going to go out of business. I mean, unless reimbursement rates go up significantly, there's no way that these companies are going to be able to stay in business. So, I mean, we'll see what that means for patients and what that means for PTs, outpatient PTs, but I mean, you just really can't stay in business with reimbursement rates where they are. So anyway, that being said, there's a lot of open jobs for outpatient PTs, but it's more important than ever to interview, make sure it's a job that fits you well. Don't go to a facility that's wanting you to see 24 patients a day so they can stay in business. I know they need to see that many to stay in business, but I mean, that's not your problem. So if you can find a place that you can see 10 to 12 and have a very comfortable schedule, definitely do that instead of going with a facility that's 20 to 25 a day.
Yeah, I mean, unless you're really being super picky on a location and you absolutely have to have this one location, I wouldn't settle for these crappy outpatient jobs that are already, they're trying to lower the rates, they're trying to make you see more patients. There are good jobs out there, so, make sure to interview and find a job that's right for you.
Yep.
All right, so that's a little bit on rates right now. One other question that we asked the companies is, are you seeing a lot of contract cancellations? And this is important for you to know, again, when it goes back to that question of, is it a good time to be a travel therapist? Is it going to be secure? If I leave my good, secure situation to go be a traveler, am I just going to show up to get canceled? The good news is they said that cancellations are pretty low overall. Again, it's kind of a therapist market right now, that therapists are in such high demand that the rate of cancellation is pretty low.
And it's been low for several years now. So cancellations do happen. We hear from people, at least a couple people per week, that had a contract canceled and it puts them in a bad position. And it's terrible when it happens, but it is rare. And, sometimes bad luck plays into it. Sometimes you can kind of weed some of the places out that might be more willing to cancel you by interviewing and figuring out why they need a traveler. But sometimes it's just the way things go, and a contract will cancel. But just rest assured that if you do have a contract canceled, it's not a common thing. It does not happen very often. I would say far less than 10% of contracts get canceled.
Yeah, we've only ever been canceled once in all of our years of doing it. So, and that was a pre-start cancel where we even had an opportunity to figure something out before we started. So.
Yep.
It's definitely rare, and again, it kind of goes back to supply and demand. It's going to be more rare for a physical therapist to get canceled because they're dying for PT staff. They're not easily filling these jobs. They need you. Whereas a COTA is going to be more likely to get canceled because there's less need.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess to add to that, some of these jobs are sitting open for several months right now. They really need someone. They can't increase their rate, so they're just sitting there with the job open, especially PT outpatient jobs. And if you go there and you're not doing a perfect job, they're going to be very unwilling to cancel your contract because they know how hard it's going to be to get someone else in there. So they're going to do everything possible to keep you there. And that's another reason why in this sort of situation where supply and demand is in your favor as a traveler, if it's a situation where you get there and they want you to see too many patients or they want you to bill excessively or something like that, almost always, if you push back, they're going to work with you on it, and they're not just going to be like, "Oh, we got to get rid of you." That's very unlikely right now.
Yeah, that actually, if you watched our video a few months ago, the contract that we did this spring, we had that situation where things weren't great, and we pushed back, and there was no way they were going to let us go because they were so desperate for help. So they were going to do anything to work with us to make it right in order for us to stay. And we even kind of got to the point of like being tempted to cancel on them because things were bad, and they were like backpedaling. No, we'll work it out. Well, what do we need to do to make you stay here?
Yeah.
So don't let yourself get into a situation where you feel like you're being pushed around to build too many units or see too many patients or do something that seems unethical. Your job security is pretty high.
Yep. If you guys have any questions as we go through this, or you want us to clarify anything, I know some stuff we're like using jargon that we probably don't realize we're using, and if you're new to travel therapy, it might not make sense. So if you have any questions, the people watching on Instagram or Facebook, live right now, feel free to ask. Also, if you could give us a thumbs up, we'd really appreciate it.
Yeah, and if you guys are listening later on our podcast or on our YouTube channel, we appreciate you. We'd love if you would subscribe so that you can get notified next time we do a video or upload a podcast. We appreciate your support. All right, so the next question that we ask the companies are new grads having luck getting placed? And this, again, varies across disciplines. So for physical therapists, we're a broken record here. It's a great job market. So yes, new grad physical therapists is a great time to get into the industry. They're not going to be quite as picky about whether you have experience or not. They're more willing to take you. So it's very easy to find jobs as a new grad PT right now.
One caveat is that, yes, it's a great time to travel as a new grad, but only if it's a good fit for you as a new grad. So just because a job will take you as a new grad does not mean that you're well equipped to travel as a new grad. You need to make sure that you're self-aware, assessing yourself before you start traveling, and make sure that you feel pretty comfortable with your communication skills, your evaluation skills, your treatment skills, like all of that going into a travel job. It's not necessarily going to be way harder than a permanent job, but it's definitely going to be a little bit harder in a best case scenario. So just make sure that you're well suited for it. And just because a company will take you does not mean that it's going to be an easy job. And in some cases, when they say new grad friendly, the reason they're saying that, we mentioned this last time, is because they can't attract therapists that have been around for a while. So maybe it's a mill clinic. They know they're not going to get any therapists that have been working for 5 years that want to see 20 patients a day. So like, oh yeah, new grad friendly, but it's just to get therapists in there. It doesn't mean it's a good job for you.
Yeah, keep in mind that could have two different meanings. New grad friendly.
Yeah.
Just because it's friendly to new grads, it could just mean they're just willing to hire a new grad. Doesn't mean that it's a good fit for a new grad. So those are two different things. So make sure to interview and find out if it's a good fit for you personally. We get this question all the time. We started traveling as new grads. We've never had a permanent job. We started traveling right away, right after graduation in 2015. So you can definitely do it. We've mentored thousands of new grad therapists that have been successful as travel therapists right out. But we always recommend, if you have that question, feel free to send us a message. There's a couple articles on our website. One is like 5 keys to success as a new grad travel therapist, or another one is travel therapy right for you as a new grad? I highly recommend you go and check out those articles and really evaluate for yourself if it's going to be a good fit for you. It's not for everybody, but you definitely can be successful as a new grad travel therapist.
Yeah, so PT, if you're well equipped for it, traveling as a new grad, no problem at all. OT, you just need to be more flexible. There's half as many jobs, maybe a little bit less than half as many jobs for OTs as there are PTs, so you can't be as picky on setting and location as you could be as a PT if you're a new grad traveler. You just need to be a little bit more open. For SLPs, we've never really recommended traveling during your clinical fellowship year, but once you have your Cs, pretty easy to find travel jobs, especially if you want to work in schools or skilled nursing. You're going to find something that will take you there, but for clinical fellows, probably not the best idea to travel. If you do want to travel during your clinical fellowship year, then it's probably a good idea to do it in a school. Otherwise, it gets very difficult to line up contracts and
get your supervision hours. So that's the big thing with travel contracts. There are some travel contracts that might be willing to take you during your CF year, but it's going to be hard for you to get your supervision hours that you need to complete your requirements.
Yep.
So we generally recommend try to wait until after you complete your clinical fellowship year, but it is possible.
For PTAs, traveling as a new grad, you can do it right now. We would still recommend probably getting a little bit of experience first, just because the market, even though it's good for PTAs, it's still fairly competitive. For CODAs, we would not recommend traveling as a new grad. It's much better to get a year, maybe 2 years of experience before even trying to find jobs, because the market's so competitive that these facilities are going to take someone with experience over a new grad any day. So we really don't think it makes sense for CODAs to travel as new grads.
Yeah, you're just going to have a hard time lining up consistent back-to-back work, and it's going to put you in a bad situation financially and logistically. It's not going to be an easy time to be a new grad CODA trying to travel, so it's better if you have some experience.
Yeah, and that's not saying anything bad about PTAs or CODAs. One time we did a presentation, and I said basically what I just said, and some of the PTAs in the audience were offended. I'm not saying like you're not equipped to travel. I'm just saying like you're not going to have a good experience as a new grad traveler. Just if you get experience first, you're going to be much more eligible for a lot of these jobs that are open, and you'll be much more competitive for them if they have multiple applicants.
Yeah, because we really want you to have a great experience where you're able to find consistent back-to-back work. A lot of the reasons why people get into travel therapy is in order to make more money. But if you're not able to find consistent back-to-back jobs and you're having unwanted, unpaid time off between contracts, then you're just putting yourself in the hole financially, and it can be very frustrating.
Yep.
So that's why we say it's better if once you are in a position where your resume is more competitive, and having some experience helps with that.
Yep. Okay.
Then as far as being a new grad and applying for jobs, that's a little bit about like the different disciplines, but also the different settings. So in some circumstances, it might be easier for you to get a job as a new grad in some settings than others. So SNFs are pretty much always going to take new grads. So, and again, it's like, is that because it's new grad friendly or because they're just desperate?
Usually desperate.
So if you're willing to work in SNFs, you're always going to be able to find a job as a new grad. Hospitals and home health do tend to be more competitive and tend to want more experience. So those can be a little bit harder to get your foot in the door as a new grad. So then you might ask, well, how am I supposed to get the experience without having the experience, right? So if you had some experience during your clinical internships, that helps. If not, we recommend working alongside your recruiter to identify some clients that may be willing to do training. And you may have to have some caveats, right? So it may be that you need to go to a more rural area or a less desirable area, maybe to a smaller hospital or a more rural home health setting where they're more willing to take you on because that job's not quite as desirable for the candidates that have experience. So then you can get that experience on your resume, and then next time you'll be more competitive for the San Diego jobs or the Denver jobs or the hospital and home health jobs in the places that you really want to go, right? Or another way you can negotiate is maybe you say, I'm willing to come on for 6 months to help you out with your staffing needs if you're willing to train me. And then they may be more willing to train you in that situation because they're investing time and money into you. But if you're only going to stay for 3 months, maybe not.
Yep.
So there are certain strategies in order to get your foot in the door with these home health and hospital contracts. This is where it's super important to have a good relationship with a couple of recruiters. If you are a new grad, I would highly recommend that you reach out to us and we can help connect you with several recruiters that we know that are great at working with new grads. Not all recruiters are equal. We have a list of a ton of...
To say the least.
Yeah, we have several recruiters that we work with that we know for sure do very well with new grads, and so we can help connect you so they can provide that mentorship and assist you with your job search. So if you want to, you can fill out our recruiter recommendation form on our website at traveltherapymentor.com/recruiters.
Okay, the next question we ask is, how's the job market for PTAs and CODAs? We kind of already touched on this. PTA is doing really well, high demand. A lot of the companies seem to think that the high demand for PTAs is on the back of how strong the PT market is. That some of these clients, they would prefer a PT, but they're not getting any applicants, so they're just putting out PTA jobs to try to get somebody in there and then try to fill like the evaluation discharge needs with PRN PTs. So in some cases, yeah, they're just trying to fill the need however they can. They just desperately need somebody.
And because of that, we've actually seen some circumstances where the job might be listed that they need a PT, but sometimes they can get a PTA applicant into that job and make it work. So if you're a PTA who sees a listing for a PT, it certainly doesn't hurt to ask. Now they might say, no, we really need a PT, but it definitely doesn't hurt to ask.
Yep. CODA, we mentioned this, still slow. There's more cancels for CODAs because if they get a permanent therapist that wants to take that job, then they're much more willing to cancel. There's not as many jobs open. You have to have a lot of licenses, and the rates are fairly low right now.
Yeah, so unfortunately not a great time to be a travel CODA, but definitely possible, especially if you're somewhat open and flexible. All right, so we had 2 more questions that are a little more broad that we're going to go into and read some of the answers. Again, if you guys are watching live, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. We will answer your questions at the end. Again, hit that thumbs up button if you are learning something or enjoying the video. We appreciate your support.
Okay, the first question, or next question, what do you foresee for the travel therapy job market through the end of the year and into early 2025?
So I'm just going to read all the different answers because it was kind of all over the place. So one company said, we expect the market to stay hot, but competitions for PTs to ramp up. So I'm intrigued to see why they think the competition for PTs is going to ramp up, because most of them said it's still very much a therapist market. The next company said there is a bit of a slowdown this time of year around the holidays. In years past, end of Q4 and beginning of Q1 tend to be the lowest regarding new jobs. And we're going to talk about that here at the end when we summarize everything about your job search as we come to the end of the year and to the beginning of the year.
Another company said that staying about the same, potentially more increased pay to draw therapists to the rural contracts, but even the desirable locations are paying more than pre-2020. So, like we kind of mentioned, the jobs that are more desperate are willing to pay more money, of course. So, rural jobs, places that are less desirable, there's a lot more room to negotiate. If they really need someone, a lot of times they'll be willing to increase the pay rate.
The next company said through the end of the year, jobs will be steady. There will be jobs available, but there's typically not as many candidates available that are submitting to jobs because a lot of contractors choose to take the holidays off and then start back early in January, which again, we're going to talk about. That's very much a trend we see this kind of time of year. Next company said lots of great job opportunities to be filled. So the jobs are still there. They're still available. The next company summarized it pretty well. I'm seeing a big number of travelers that are looking for jobs the first or second week of January. More so than ever in previous years. This is definitely the trend that we always see. I believe this is because of an increase in overall travel therapists nationwide. Important, and I can't stress this enough to any current traveler, you should be decisive and act quickly. This will not be a market where you can waver and wait to submit to a job. This is the one time of year where there's hundreds of current travelers as well as new grads flooding the job market at the same time. You should have a plan and be realistic, maybe be a little bit more open on job location if you really want that January start date, and act quick if the job is presented to you for an interview. Also, keep in mind that this is an interesting point. New grads just took their boards, especially for PT, and that could limit the amount of available jobs because some of them are taking those as permanent jobs. So they might snatch up some of these formerly travel jobs as permanent therapists, which limits the number of travel jobs during this time. So it's just a competitive time of year. It's important to just, try to act quickly and get into a job if you can, if you're really looking for that January start date.
A couple more companies, no significant change, and we'll predict the market to stay about the same, and the rates will slowly increase the next year due to cost of living. So that would be nice if that's the case. Personally, we probably don't think there'll be massive increases in rates by any means. I think this is probably about the new baseline. Probably not a big drop, but probably not a big increase going into 2025.
Early January is always competitive because everyone wants to start traveling then. We have not seen a decrease in demand for clinicians, and facilities are still in need of help, especially now as we head to the end of the year. So they don't foresee any shift in the market or any changes. So let's touch on that a little bit before we go into the last question, which was just general insights.
So we have made, I don't know how many videos, we've written articles about the January job lull. That's what a lot of people in the travel therapy world call it. We used to see that every single year prior to 2020. So 16, 17, 18, 19, when we were traveling, going into January, it was always really hard to find jobs because so many travelers want to take time off during the holidays and they want to start back fresh first or second week of January. Post 2020, the market was so strong and everything was thrown off that we didn't really see that much. And we were wondering maybe that will be gone now. Maybe for whatever reason, either there's more facilities that want to hire people prior to the beginning of the year, or maybe more travelers want to have the security of having a job going into the new year or whatever. But it does look like going into 2025 that might be back because there does seem to be a huge demand of travelers looking for jobs in the first or second week of January. So if that's you, just be mindful that it's going to be a lot harder to find jobs during that time. We ran into this a couple times during our travels, that trying to find a job at the beginning of January, it's very convenient to be like, okay, I'm going to take December 20th to January 4th off, stay at home, hang out with friends and family, it'll be great, and then I'll start back January 4th. But just keep in mind that there's probably 400, 500, 600 other people that have the same idea in mind that are looking for those same jobs that you are.
Yeah, not only current travel therapists have that strategy, but people that are looking to make a change in their career have that same strategy, right? Like if you're a permanent therapist and you're like, I'm going to put in my notice for before the holidays, take the holidays off, and I'll start my new adventure as a travel therapist January 4th or whatever the first day of the fiscal year is. Same thing for new grads. I'm going to take off through the holidays. I'm used to having my Christmas break and all that. And then I'll start my new adventure as a travel therapist in January. So this is a thing. So keep in mind, it is more competitive. Now, I will say that what we've seen in some circumstances, because physical therapists are in such high demand, if you go ahead and start talking to recruiters now, some of them do have jobs open that they can go ahead and submit you for now that will have a January start date. Whereas in the past, it used to be you kind of have to wait until January to get into that January start date to do the interview and everything. So right now is a really good time. Maybe not like this exact week because it's Thanksgiving coming up, but the weeks between Thanksgiving and Christmas, go ahead and get in touch with recruiters and get them submitting you to jobs right now, hopefully for your January start date. Alternatively, if you have the opportunity to start a contract in these next few weeks and then just ask for the time off, that's a good strategy too. Where sometimes they'll be willing to hire you if you could start in November or December and go through January instead of waiting until January to start.
Yeah, once we figured out that this was an issue, probably 2018 or so, we tried our best to work through the holidays, be on contract during the holidays so that we didn't have to deal with any of that. We also found that normally it's a pretty laid back time to work anyway. Going around the holidays, you get a lot of patient cancellations, time off from work. Usually it's not a big deal to work around those times, but we definitely understand that if you're in California and your family's in North Carolina, you're not going to want to work through the holidays, but just keep in mind that it is going to be a little more difficult. Usually by the end of January, going into February, that is completely resolved, but for those first 2 weeks especially, maybe even the third week of January, it's a lot more competitive.
Yeah, so what does this mean? It means that sometimes you're going to run into a situation where you can't start on the exact date that you want to start in January, or it means that you're going to have to settle for a job that wasn't your first pick if you're really determined to start on that date. So it's a really hard time to be extremely picky and get all of your boxes checked. So just keep that in mind. If you are trying to start in January, sometimes that's a situation where you have to be a little bit more lenient on the setting or location or pay in order to make sure you get that start date. This is something financially that we advise people on, like especially in our course about how to be a successful traveler, is there comes a certain point in your job search where you have to start making concessions if you want to start on time. Otherwise, each week that you have to delay your start date, you're missing out on thousands of dollars of pay. So, at some point you're like, I really want outpatient. I really want this city. I really want above $2,500 a week. But if you keep waiting and waiting and waiting for that perfect scenario to come around, and now you've missed 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks of work, how much money did you miss out on instead of taking that job that was paying $1,900 a week?
Yeah.
So do the math, realize that it's not a good decision usually financially to keep waiting for the perfect situation by delaying your start date.
Yeah, so as it gets closer to your start date, you definitely want to get more flexible in what you're willing to accept. That's always the way we did it. And we pretty much always had jobs lined up on the date that we wanted, but we would be as flexible as we needed to be to make that happen.
Yep. So, and again, it depends on your priorities. For some people, it's not always finances, but I will say that most people we talk to, finances are a big consideration. So definitely keep that in mind. If you're sitting around waiting for a higher paying contract, how many weeks of delayed work will it work out in your favor to get $200 extra per week,
And I have talked to some travelers that think like, oh, missing work, that's not a huge deal. It's nice to have the time off. Having planned time off is really nice. Having unplanned time off is stressful because you can't just relax and hang out. You're trying to find jobs, you're interviewing, your recruiter's texting you. It's not like just a fun vacation time. So try to avoid the unplanned time off if you can at as much as possible.
Yeah. All right, so we'll wrap up here with the final question that we asked the recruiters, and then we'll go through your questions that you have in the comments. So again, if you are watching live on Facebook or Instagram, feel free to leave a question in the comments. I see we have a few, and we'll go through them. Okay, so we asked the recruiters any other general insights that you have about the job market or anything that you would like us to share. One company said, I don't see this roller coaster slowing down anytime soon. The need for recruitment help is a theme. I do believe this is why we're seeing so many agency switches and we're getting shopped around. So what he's basically saying here is that it's a traveler's market. So travelers are shopping around different recruiters, different companies, because they have a lot of options and a lot of choices. So that's good news for us.
It's good news for us. We used to see this all the time in the nursing market when it was really strong, is that obviously companies and recruiters, they want loyalty. They want therapists that will stay with them, take all their contracts with them. It's a lot easier for them to place a candidate in multiple positions than it is to place a new candidate in each position. And a lot of times they will reward you for that loyalty and giving lower margins. They'll try to pay you as high as possible. They'll try to help you out any way they can. But when the market is really hot like this, there's a bunch of jobs open, people are using job boards, they know they have a lot of demand for therapists, then people often hop around. And for therapists, that's a fine thing, as long as you're working with good companies and good recruiters and you have a good experience. But for the companies and recruiters, obviously, that's a negative.
The next company said, there's no better time to start travel therapy than now. This is the best market that we've seen in my tenure as a recruiter, and there's really no signs of decline.
Next company said, high pay will be in less desirable areas. More desirable settings and locations are going to fill up quick, so you need to be on it with those and ready to submit when jobs post. And several other companies have mentioned similar things. Like, if you want something very specific and it's a desirable job. So like outpatient Denver, outpatient San Diego for PTs. That's something that a lot of people want. You can't like dilly-dally and try to negotiate and nickel and dime on the rate, because that job's going to fill quick. So if you really want something like that and it pops up, really try to get in there fast, because they're going to have a lot of applicants. Any desirable setting or job location is going to have that.
The next company said, hopefully we'll see the compact in 2025 for OT and SLP. This is something that's been a long time coming. We get a lot of questions about this. Physical therapists have had the compact for several years now, and it really does make life easier as a travel therapist. The OT and SLP compact have been really slow to get started. They keep pushing back the start dates, but both of them are anticipated to start in 2025. So if that does happen, that will open up a lot more options for OTs, CODAs, and SLPs.
We'll see if that happens, because I remember we made a video in 2019 about the PT compact, and we mentioned the OT and SLP compact, and I think back then they were planning on like 2022, maybe 2023, but yeah, it just keeps getting pushed back. So hopefully 2025, but I guess we'll see.
The next company said that having done this for more than 16 years, they can't stress enough how many people right now are looking for the same start dates. Again, the January 6th or 13th, and they're wanting warmer climates, right? People want to go to warm climates in January. Just want to remind the audience that there are only so many jobs that open up on given dates and given areas. So this is the one time of the year that a travel therapist has to be a bit more mindful, a bit more realistic on what you're wanting. Move quickly, try not to be too selective, because it is a very competitive time of year.
I already mentioned that. Overall, the job market is strong with low cancellation rates and rates staying the same but slowly increasing. Just continuing to educate on market is helpful. Always keep in mind that the more open, the more opportunities you'll have. We always talk about that. If you want something very specific, you're going to have a few options. If you're open to more states, more settings, you're going to have tons of options. So just keep in mind what's most important to you. Is it the location? Is it the setting? Is it just the highest pay? And you can pretty much, at this point, as long as you're not a CODA, you can pretty much find something that will at least fit your top priority, if not your second priority. Ideally your third priority, but definitely the top one.
The last thing that this recruiter mentioned is we have some amazing clients that have needs all over the country. We really appreciate our travelers that are willing to take travel assignments to help provide care to those in need. I do think that's an important point. We've talked about this before, but as a travel therapist, quite often we look at this as our adventure. We're in it to get something out of it for us, and that's a great thing. You should get something out of it for you: higher pay, more adventure, explore new places that you haven't been before. But it also is important to think about what care we're providing to underserved areas. And I do think that there's something really valuable in considering some of these rural or lesser known places that really need a lot of care and a lot of help, and they can't attract permanent staff. We've really enjoyed some of our rural contracts. I know a lot of you are, only wanting the big cities or only wanting the really cool locations, but definitely don't overlook some of these rural areas that could really use your help, and you may have a wonderful experience. Some of the patients there and the staff are just amazing. They'll be so appreciative of your help. And as travel therapists ourselves, we've had a really good experience where, maybe there's not a ton to do during the week in the location that you take a travel contract, but on the weekends you can drive and go different places and explore the whole new state and the whole new area. And honestly, sometimes some of the small stuff that just doesn't even seem like a big thing is cool. Like you'll be in a new small town and they have a little coffee shop or a little museum or a little thing that you've never heard of before, and you didn't think of it, but you're going to have a great experience. So just be open-minded when it comes to looking at contracts. There are needs all over the U.S. in all the small towns and counties and cities. So, be open-minded.
One more thing to add for rural areas. The reason we took a lot of our contracts in rural areas is we knew that we could get pretty good pay rates. They're not going to be like the highest pay rates, but pretty good pay rates and very low cost of living. So that's what we were always looking for, is decent pay, low cost of living that allowed us to save the most money. If you search for a lot of these really high paying jobs, they're usually in high cost of living areas. And the amount you can save is actually less than you think you can, or less than you could at a rural contract. So just keep that in mind. A job paying $2,800 might not mean much if rent is $3,500 a month, whereas a job paying $2,400, where you can rent an apartment for $650, $700 a month, you're going to make a lot more at that job. So just keep that in mind if finances are part of your priorities in terms of traveling.
Yeah. All right, so that's everything that we wanted to share as far as the job market update. To summarize, it's a really good job market for most disciplines, especially physical therapists. It's a little bit tough right now for OTs and CODAs, but definitely still possible to travel. If you are interested in getting started with travel therapy in 2025, now is a great time to go ahead and start talking to some recruiters for your January and February start dates. If you are interested in our help, we have taken the time to interview hundreds of recruiters at this point.
Definitely more than 100.
Dozens of staffing companies. We personally choose to align ourselves with about 12 companies and about 60 recruiters, I think.
Over 50.
More than 50 recruiters. So if you do fill out our recruiter recommendation form on our website, I read every single one of them and I look at your specific preferences and I match you to 3 recruiters that I think would be a good fit for you. There's nothing automated on our website, so if you get a response from me, I typed it out myself and I took into consideration your specific criteria. So we'd be happy to help you. That's something that we've really taken a lot of time to do over the years, to help people get connected with good recruiters who are going to, have jobs that you want and take your situation into consideration. Like I mentioned, like new grads, I wouldn't connect you with certain recruiters. I would connect you with ones that are better at working with new grads. So reach out if you want our help with that. And then also if you're a current traveler and you just have any questions, feel free to send us a message anytime. We're happy to help.
And we've had, I think we just passed 6,000 of those forms that people have filled out. So Whitney has a lot of experience matching people up with recruiters and companies that'll work well for them.
Yep. So please reach out if you have questions or need help. All right. So we're going to go through your questions on the chat. Hey, Tom.
Tom says, howdy friends, congrats on the little one. You guys were missed at TravCon this year. I've been in my perm job for over 18 months and I love it, but I missed the travel money. So I'm strongly considering getting back in the travel game. Oh man, already. A year and a half. Yeah, we missed TravCon. We wish we could have gone. Whitney was 8 months pregnant. It would have been a major stretch for a lot of reasons. Even just the flight back and forth would have made us nervous. But hopefully we'll make it next year. But I guess this coming year, but we'll see.
Yeah. So let us know if you decide to get back into traveling. It's definitely a really good time, especially as a physical therapist.
Rates are probably even better than when you left.
Mason asked, what went bad at your contract? So Mason, if you want to go back and look at our video from, what would that have been, July?
Yeah, beginning of July.
Where we summarized our contract, we talked all about it. But, basically it was an outpatient clinic that wasn't great. I mean, they weren't bad. They were not like the worst PT meals we've ever worked at, but they weren't great. And so just kind of, the normal outpatient BS, getting pressured to try to bill certain units and see a certain number of patients, and they're trying to double book us and triple book us, and just the normal outpatient BS, to be honest. The
kind of thing where in the interview you say like, okay, double book every now and then will be fine, and then suddenly it's like 4 per day and a triple book, and the kind of things that outpatients try to push PTs to do.
Yeah, so I mean, it was not like totally unexpected that it was going to be like that, but it wasn't great. But luckily it was a part-time contract and we got through it.
Allie says, I've had some great experiences in rural and remote Texas. Yeah, we haven't taken any Texas contracts, but we've driven through Texas a couple times, and there's some really cool towns in like very, very remote rural areas of Texas.
Yeah, that's awesome, Allie. All right, let's go through a few more questions here on Instagram. Thanks, a bunch of you guys tuned in. Appreciate you. Okay. I'm a new grad, acute care PT, finishing up my extension in a rural hospital. My next contract will be a split acute and inpatient rehab. Do you have any advice about inpatient rehab contracts? Are they more ethical than SNFs?
Very often, yes. Skilled nursing, for whatever reason, most people, if they have a bad experience traveling, it's skilled nursing or it's an outpatient mill. I don't know if I've ever heard of somebody having a bad experience in inpatient rehab. Part of that is because there's fewer of them, so there's not as many people taking those contracts, so you wouldn't hear about it as much. But normally they are very regimented. Normally the scheduling is really good. Normally the staff is way more helpful. The nurses, the CNAs, rehab techs, everyone's helpful. The only experience we have with inpatient rehabs were wonderful. So definitely would not be nearly as concerned about going to an inpatient rehab as a skilled nursing. The only difference, I would say the only part, in my opinion, that would be harder is that you're going to deal with a lot more acute issues. Skilled nursing, you basically know what you're going to get. Inpatient rehab, you might have more like recent strokes, recent spinal cord injuries, stuff that I would be intimidated by. But if you're comfortable with that, then it'll be great.
Yeah, clinical skill-wise, you definitely need to be on your game.
Yeah.
But as far as ethical, so we never hear any problems about productivity or billing when it comes to hospital contracts. And from what we can understand, it's because the hospitals get reimbursed higher. for their services. So even like a hospital-based outpatient, they can reimburse higher than a private practice outpatient. And so they don't hound you as much about your units and your productivity and that sort of thing. So we always had good experience with hospital contracts. Inpatient rehab is super desirable. Unfortunately, they're hard to come by because they're so desirable.
Yeah.
Typically, those jobs are filled with permanent staff, so we don't see inpatient rehab travel contracts that often. We actually get questions about that a lot. People are like, I'd love to work in inpatient rehab. Can I only take inpatient rehab contracts? Keep in mind that a lot of times when jobs are listed for travel therapy jobs, they'll say inpatient, but that doesn't necessarily mean inpatient rehab. Sometimes these databases will just list it as inpatient, but it doesn't specify whether it's inpatient acute care or inpatient rehab. So don't get your hopes up if you see where it says inpatient and you were expecting inpatient rehab. Make sure to always try to find out, is it acute care or is it inpatient rehab? Because quite often it's acute care.
Yep. I ended up taking an acute care contract that I thought was inpatient rehab until I interviewed, and still ended up taking it, but I was told that, oh, it's inpatient. I'm like, oh, inpatient, I've got experience in inpatient, it'll be great, and then it was acute care. So just realize that recruiters, companies, VMSs, their terminology is not always the same as our terminology.
Yep. All right, Nikki says, the outpatient PT clinic that I'm leaving on January the 10th desperately needs another traveler in Massachusetts. I'm not surprised to hear that, Nikki. We have heard from so many recruiters recently that there's a ton of outpatient clinics in Massachusetts specifically that really need travel therapists. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Right now, Massachusetts outpatient is like
dozens of jobs.
Yeah.
When we took contracts, outpatient contracts in Massachusetts, and literally there was 3 jobs in the whole state, and we got 2 of them for our contracts. So things have changed a lot.
Yeah, so if you want to go to Massachusetts for outpatient, there's tons of jobs right now. Nikki says, thank you guys. Your help and insights are the best. You're welcome, Nikki. Glad to help. All right, I think that's all the questions. So thank you guys again for tuning in with us tonight. Shout out to those of you that will listen to the replay later. As we mentioned, we did just have a baby, so it might be a little bit more sporadic here with us doing videos. Hopefully we can get back to doing them every couple of weeks, but we're still adapting to parenthood, and we got the holidays coming up, so we'll just kind of see what the next several weeks bring.
Yep.
All right, have a great night, guys. Thanks for tuning in.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.